You're listening to TFM.
Want to join in the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode? Join the Babel Conference, our listeners' discussion group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field, and we'll look forward to seeing you there.
Hey everyone, I'm Rod Roddenberry, and you're listening to Trek FM.
Are you taking all these books? I thought I'd take some light reading. Guess I got bored.
Well, hello and welcome to Literary Treks, TFM's books and comic show for Star Trek. And I'm just one of the hosts here, Matthew Rushing, and I'm so excited to be with the one and only Casey Pettitt. How are you doing, Casey?
I'm good. I'm ready for a trek across the frontier plains of a new planet, and just can't wait for my weeks-long journey to see how this world goes. Or doesn't go.
Yeah, I mean, all I got to say is, saddle up your horses because we're ready to ride.
Yes.
And it is going to be a ride tonight. We've got a fantastic episode for you as we're going to be talking to John Jackson Miller about his book, The High Country, which is the very first Star Trek Strange New Worlds book. But before we get there, I got a couple things to do here in the news. But one, we want to say thank you for listening so much. It means a lot that you would check us out here on Literary Treks. If you're listening to us and you haven't already done so, hit subscribe wherever that is, and you'll get the podcast as soon as it drops. You can also benefit the podcast by going over to something like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, giving us a star rating and review, let people know what you think of the show. Really does help our show continue to grow even after all of these years. And, of course, you can find us on all of the social medias. We've got Twitter at TrekFM. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. There's Instagram, TrekFM. We've got the listeners-only discussion group. And if you'd like to talk to listeners from all over the world, type Babel into the search field on Facebook. You'll find the Babel Conference. You can join and discuss all of the shows we're doing here there. Of course, we've got our main website, Trek.fm, where you can see all of the shows we're doing. There's so much happening here these days. And there's a contact section if you would like to send us an email. Really important, though, we've got some amazing people who support us through Patreon, like Casey Pettitt or Greg Rosier, who are associate producers here on Literary Treks. They make sure that everything that we're doing can keep coming to you each and every week. And without listeners just like them, it's not possible for that to happen. So go to patreon.com/TrekFM and become part of our team. Well, Casey, we've had so many comics coming out recently, and it is very fun because before we dive into our interview, we do have another comic, a Strange New Worlds comic. We've got the Illyrian Enigma. Issue 3 has just dropped. And oh my goodness, this issue has so much cool stuff happening in it that was kind of boggling my mind. But one, can we talk about nude stone Spock?
I don't know what else there is to talk about except that right there. And if listeners haven't picked up this comic and you want to see a nude stone Spock, there it is. That was definitely the weirdest part of this comic. But, as a whole with the story, I feel like, was that necessary? I don't know, but maybe. I guess, for what Spock had to do, turning to stone might, having to do that would prevent anybody else from going to the planet, as we see in the comic, and not something you'll see on TV anytime soon, probably. Rock Spock.
No, although you might. I love that, Rock Spock. It sounds like a really weird band.
Yes.
But you might see it on Star Trek Discovery. So that does sound
true.
like something that they would do. What I thought was really interesting about this issue is the way in which it deepens our understanding of the Illyrians and the past that they have. And giving us the indication and letting us know here that their past has a very rich history with the Vulcans, which we didn't know. Spock didn't know. It doesn't seem to be anywhere on Vulcan at this point. It seems to be maybe hidden. And this also, as Spock experiences the past through this monument that's still there on Illyria, which there's very little that's left there because of everything that's happened to the planet. The Vulcans seem to have visited before the time of Surak. And so it does, I guess, make sense in many ways why that might be lost as information, because we know that time was, a time of war, a time of massive change, after Surak was able to convince everybody that logic was the way to go. But I think I'm really enjoying this comic, and I'm really enjoying the way in which I think that they are utilizing the comic property to be able to do some things that would be very difficult to do on television, cost-wise, and yet a comic is the perfect way to be able to do it. And so, to me, this issue, it deepens the mystery in a way that has me on the edge of my seat waiting for the next issue to come out, because this story is just getting more and more interesting with every issue, which is really impressive.
Yeah, and I think as we're seeing in the comic, like you said, there's things that they're doing here that we wouldn't necessarily see on the show, but especially with this issue of seeing how it's going to be the way that I'm thinking they're taking the story, as far as, taking them to Vulcan now and bringing in that aspect of the connection with the Illyrians. It feels like a good place, that the comic might end in a good place for the show to pick back up. When we started, we're like, why wouldn't they just tell the story on screen? And it's turning out that, maybe there still will be story to tell on screen after this, but, we're still getting a good story in the meantime. So I'm really enjoying that. And, as with our book that we're going to talk about today, and, I've seen rumors online that there's season 3 hasn't been confirmed yet, but they're, kind of already starting to plan on it. We've got a long way to go with Strange New Worlds. That's super exciting. And, this comic is just another example of what a rich time period, what a good cast and characters that we have in Strange New Worlds. And, once the Illyrian Enigma storyline is over, I kind of look forward to seeing what they do in the comics going forward with Strange New Worlds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I could not agree with you more. And I think one of the most important things here too, and something you were mentioning there about, are we going to get to season 3 and everything? Look, if you like a show, one, make sure you're watching it. Make sure you're paying for the streaming service. Make sure you're reading the comics and the books and everything that go along with it. Those are the things that let a studio know that this is profitable for them to keep making. And Strange New Worlds is a show to which I 100% agree that we should be making more of. I've got the 4K Blu-rays on order for when the season comes out, and I'm just so excited they're actually doing that in the first place. This show is gorgeous, and it'll look even better in 4K disc. But yeah, these are ways in which that happens. And what I love, Casey, is that this isn't one of those things where I feel like I have to be nice about something, which, if anybody's listened to the show long enough, I'm never nice about things I don't really like. And so, in the sense that I'm not afraid to tell people my opinion, right? But this is definitely a comic, and it's a show to which I 100% am behind. It's been great. It continues to be great. And so I'm very excited for that. And so, it's just, there's so much happening here with Star Trek, especially comics and the shows that are coming out, and it's just been a joy to be a fan, I think, over the last couple of years now. And I don't know, Casey, maybe we should hitch up the horses and head on over to the interview room so we can talk to John Jackson Miller in the high country?
Giddy up.
Well, Casey, there is absolutely nothing better than Literary Treks having an interview with one of the authors to talk about a new Star Trek book. And I'm so excited that the premiere Star Trek book for Star Trek Strange New Worlds is with our friend John Jackson Miller in the High Country. And John, it is so good to have you back here on Literary Treks.
I'm glad to be here.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, so this is huge. You know, obviously we've got a brand new Star Trek show, and you get to be the first person to write a novel in that. And so I just wanted to know kind of right up front, how did you figure out the timeline for this book and where it would fit best in season 1?
Well, it all depends on when we start talking about the spoilers here.
Well, we'll hit the spoilers
Right away.
here because everybody should have read the book before this. But go for it.
Okay. Yeah, the way that this happened is I was asked to write the novel in the summer of 2021, which is quite some time ago, but that is an indication of how the paper shortage and everything else caused this book to be pushed forward. And so the show was not out yet, and I'm talking with Kirsten Beyer about it, who is the executive producer of the series. And the person who always helps us on integrating with the TV shows. And one of the things that she said is, well, obviously we can set it whenever you want to set it, but I really think that the work of this one actor, Bruce Horak, as Hemmer, is impressive, and it would be great if we could get to use him. And of course, that introduced constraints right away, at least, depending on how much, time I wanted to spend in this period with him. Because, again, the novel actually does have epilogues, which are somewhat later, and we don't say how much later they are. But the sense is that most of the book is going to take place in the time frame where we know Hemmer. And so that describes about 7 episodes where it could be in or between. And then I was thinking about it, and I said, I really need to constrain this even further because as a consequence of the predicament that I've come up with for this planet, the planet in Strange New Worlds, the High Country, I came up with something where I wanted to do something where it was one planet, many worlds, one planet, many cultures, one planet, many things. But one of the things about the planet is that there is something preventing electricity from functioning the way it normally does across distances, and so I knew that this would be a threat, keeping Enterprise away. If I had somebody on Enterprise who had a motive for saying, let's stay where we are, let's not approach too closely. And that, of course, is Dr. Mabenga, because, we put the story during that time where Rukia, his daughter, is in the transporter buffers. So, again, that sort of constrained it further. And then it was just a matter of I looked at it and said, okay, I want to be as close to that pretty much as I can get, because I want this crew to have had some time together. I don't want to be near the earlier episodes. We've got Uhura's first couple of adventures. We have Lon's arrival. We have all these things where I don't want to be too close to that. And so, that's really kind of how I zeroed in for where this thing is. To be honest, I kind of wish we didn't have the historian's note at all on this book, because I think it is kind of self-explanatory based on what I've just said. If you've watched the first season, you know when it has to be.
Yeah. I think you're 100% right on that. I didn't necessarily need the historian's note, because with Mbenga and with Hemmer, you kind of know where the story takes place, and
That's right.
I think it works really well. And I'm glad you did that too, because Chris and I talked about on Saddle Up, where we talk about the series. We loved Hemmer as a character, and we're really sad to see the fact that I know it was part of the story. He knew from the beginning that this was working towards that end, but having an Anar as a character to be able to explore and just, I always loved Andorians anyway, and that whole area of we just never really got a lot of Andorians on screen, and so I was sad to see him go, and so I'm glad you got to use him in the novel, because he's a great character.
He is, and a friend of mine is friends with Bruce Horak, the actor, and he has already conveyed a copy in that direction.
Oh, that's
So
great.
Nice.
whether he's gotten it yet or not, I don't know, but I wanted to make sure of that. And so, I thought that, I could do a story that included in it a big moment for him. And he kind of gets that in here.
That's awesome. Well, this is, like your Picard novel, where you use the Iosians. You went back and kind of pulled something from Enterprise again, which was phenomenal. And I think most fans might be a little bit shocked as to what you pull here, because it's one of those episodes which is not necessarily the most popular Enterprise episode out there.
Right.
What was the genesis of this story in using that North Star Enterprise episode as a foundation?
Well, the thing is, even though, obviously it's a one-off episode where, they're trying to save some money on the sets by doing the Western Town thing. Even though you have that, it is a story that had been referred to quite a bit in what is now the I guess you would call it the first Splinter universe, or as I think it should be called, the Pocket Universe.
Yes.
Because it's all pocket books. And it stops really, there's a handful of books. I think Coda and a couple of other books are the only ones that are not pocket. They're gallery. We had already used Skagarans already. I had a character, Kaizak, who is in the Prey trilogy, and he's one of a couple of Skagaran characters that had joined Starfleet much later in the Next Generation era. And I thought, well, what I wanted to do, obviously right off the bat, I wanted to do something that would take place on a single planet, as stated. I wanted to do something exploring a little bit about, what is it that appeals to Pike about the rustic life, because obviously he has a foot in both worlds. I wanted to also chase down some other things. We've got several mentions of there being Luddite colonies in Star Trek, and of course in the original series you got implications of that as well, and that there are people that sort of have a yen to go back to what things were. And then there's just this whole class of Trek episode, just as you have, with, as you mentioned, a piece of the action is an example of the kind of episode where it's about cultural contamination. There's a whole lot of stuff where the way that they get to what is very clearly a cost saving thing of being able to use sets that we're familiar with, that already exist. The other way that they get there is with sort of the abduction story, the alien abduction, and obviously alien abductions are everywhere in science fiction and in Trek as well. And it occurred to me that for what happens in North Star, and this always drives me crazy, is there's no real name for that planet. Except for the name of the episode. There was nothing in canon anywhere about it. For what happens in North Star to work, they would have had to have taken a whole lot of stuff. They would have had to have taken people, but they also would have had to have taken buildings. They would have had to have taken horses. They would have had to have taken feed. They would have had to have taken basically the whole biome. And I was already in Rogue Elements dealing with this notion of and I'm interested to see how many people realize the connection between these two novels, because there's a significant one. The Silvus project in Rogue Elements has the ability to, using late 24th century technology, transport wide swaths, I mean acres at a time, and or hectares or whatever we call them in the book, and replace them and transplant things. And I said, okay, well, what if you did this with people? And if you did this with regard to the people of North Star, well, that sets up a situation that potentially explains the episode, because I was not satisfied, and again, it's not my place to judge the episode or be satisfied or not, but I couldn't buy that anybody would cross the galaxy for manual labor, no matter what the conditions were on the planet, because again, there's just a lot of energy to expend to be able to do that. And it was never really established what manual labor they would be doing. And so I said, okay, let's do something where we sort of cast the episode in a somewhat different light, the same way that I did with Die Standing and the gas creature, from Obsession. What if it's a totally different thing than we think it is? And what if there is actually a not necessarily a malevolent thing going on here? What if there is this intention by this benevolent group of people to pluck people from planets where if they remain, there's going to be environmental destruction or they're going to die, and use them to bring them to this world that they have found, where it allows people to remain in a state of technological grace, where they will be there permanently without moving to the future. You don't have to worry about that kind of evolution happening. And I thought, well, this is great, because this also ties into questions that we've seen in Discovery in the New Eden episode, which is, I think, our second one with Pike, where you've got that's one of the first places where the Luddites are brought up in the new series, but that this notion that there's this group of people who have been transplanted, and also we have the character being left with a battery in violation, we would think, maybe of whatever the new Prime Directive is, and because the Prime Directive is new at this time as well, this allowed this to be sort of virgin territory, something they hadn't really considered, something they hadn't really dealt with yet. And so, then comes the process of knitting it all together, because I knew what I wanted to have happen with regard to, it would be a patchwork of peoples, and not all, the only humans on the planet Yeah, it's not like the cowboys are the only humans on this planet. There are several other colonies that have been taken in over the years from Earth, and several other places that just happen to be at the time pre-industrial. And one of the things that I did is I went back through memory alpha, looking for all the pre-industrial people I could find.
Nice.
The ones that were, and so there are mentions of some really, folks that we don't usually hear about. And the reason we don't usually hear about is that Starfleet decided to leave them where they were. So I have that, but I also wanted to have a dynamic as well. And there's multiple ideas in this book. Obviously, I wanted to have the dynamic of, well, if maybe somebody also gets stuck on this planet by accident, and here we have the Vulcans, and they come in from a particular time, and in early drafts, because we went through about 3 drafts on the outline. In early drafts, we had a much less amenable Vulcan presence on this planet because of when I brought them in from during Enterprise. Was around the time of it was actually before the founding of the Federation. And as I went on, the book both got more streamlined, less populous in the sense that I didn't have as many Enterprise crew members stranded on the planet. I also found that the book got increasingly more peaceful in terms of violence. And I think I ended up, and again, obviously we're in total spoiler territory here for both books. But I had always joked that that Rogue Elements had my lowest body count for a novel yet, because it was I think there's actually 2 deaths in it. Strange New Worlds, The High Country is 0, and it is not, well, actually, now that I think about it, Takedown is also 0. Because of the acts of the aliens, and the fact that in that book, not to spoil yet another one, but I had done a lot of books in a row that have some fairly sizable casualty lists. Prey has more or less the Battle of the Five Armies, and everywhere Giorgio goes and die standing, they're just people left on the ground somewhere. And of course, Enterprise War. What is it? It's a big war. But this book, one can visualize it as, I think, Margaret Clark, my editor, put it really well. When I started, the thought was, well, people are going to think this is a Western. And then as I went further and I started adding some other bits of genres, and then as we overlaid over the top of it this very Star Trek conundrum, and then the technological or the scientific peril that is involved here, that we whip on things. Margaret said, this is not a Western. This is a science fiction novel with horses in it. And, that's pretty good. I mean, to the extent that I among my advisors, I have Michael Wong, who does one of the other Trek podcasts. He was a sounding board about, the planet, the planet's geology and climate. Dr. Don Lincoln, who is a senior scientist at Fermilab, he was a sounding board when it came to how the baffle worked. The electric, the thing that was causing the electrical disruptions. But I also had my friend Beth Kanan, who is a equine or equestrian. She's a bloodstock consultant for breeders. She had already advised me on the Star Wars Kenobi novel years ago. We were trying to figure out what were the parts of a saddle on a dewback. Because even though there's no horses, there are saddles in Star Wars. But here we had a really specific question, which is, okay, we're only going to have a certain number of specimens of horses and dogs and cats and other things on this planet, and yeah, there are other human abductions in different parts of the planet as well, and we established that. Although we don't meet everybody, some we only see them from the air, or we see the evidence that they have been there, like the British sailors, whose colony very obviously dies out because of a very important missing thing. Which is that there are no women on the ship. So this is a problem. But yeah, no. There's also we have the Chinese junks, and we see pagodas here and there, and we see other things. There's the notion is that our human population is one of many, but there are several human settlers against their will. But again, they're not. The against their will part is debatable in the sense that they are treated as people who were rescued, and you have this culture, this more or less almost this religious drive that is being propagated by the people involved, by Draco's people, that's there saying, this is the story. This is the story of what happened to you, and this story is a good thing. You were saved, and it's just we've now had enough years go by that we have dissidents. We have the Menders who don't want to live under the rules anymore. We have a crazy number of rules which have developed, and a crazy number of rules that have developed, and a ridiculous bureaucracy which has developed, which is only manageable because when the Skagarans got to this planet and found really this world engine running, that did what they needed it to do. They discovered that it also had this communication system that allowed them to, join a gestalt with everybody on the planet. And those elements are all you need to make this, utopian situation work for a certain amount of time. It just can't work forever. And as Pike and Spock and Hemmer discover, with the help of Uhura, there's really something yet else going on this planet, and the thing that is causing the conditions on this planet, has the potential, if misused, to wreak incalculable harm.
Like as you were just saying, there's just like so much here, like so much to explore in this story. I mean, back in the heyday of the Star Trek novels, in the 90s, we were getting however many novels per year. A lot of times they do this event novel, and I feel like even though we're not getting as many now, like this is the definition of an event novel. It's so long. Yeah. I think I saw somewhere online that they had to decrease the font or something to save on paper. That's also because the book was part of the supply chain problems. Right. But yeah, I mean, the book is actually slightly longer than Rogue Elements, but it's 32 pages shorter. Okay. And so what they had to do is they have different fonts that they will use. It's not that they shrink the point size necessarily. They go to a different one. And that allows them to get more on the page. But I had already, I spent quite a lot of time when I was working on this book, in the outline process, streamlining so that, I knew I wanted short chapters. I knew I wanted to have everybody, it's a big help to people on the audiobook side,
when you have these chapters where you're only doing one point of view in the chapter, and you don't have to sort of recast and restart everything in the middle of a chapter. This allowed me to do something which I had not done before, which is there are no locator captions in this book, and we dropped those, and we added chapter titles, and I wanted to add the chapter titles because they gave it sort of an old-timey feel. It wasn't something that we had. Every chapter title is a single word with the word the captain, the merchants, the whatever, and it kind of feels to me like they could be the title cards on a silent movie almost. And we meet everybody, and what I by having a lot of chapters, I was also able to design a tempo for the book such that Pike got just about every other chapter, and then we would alternate between the three. It would be Pike and then Una, and then Pike and then Uhura, and then Pike and then Draco, and then Pike and we would cycle through. And Pike would always be the central character, and what would happen is these threads would slowly join with him as we progressed through the book. And initially, I had more characters, even as I said, and also initially, we were following Spock from the beginning, or not. Well, we do see what happens to him in the beginning, but Spock is off camera for a good, third of the book.
Yeah.
And that was a choice. That was a choice because I realized by taking him out of this mix, he's the easiest one to remove from it. In terms of I wouldn't have this jarring complication of going between what were fairly rustic surroundings to a naval story, to rustic surroundings to a naval story. And what I wanted to do is also have a big reveal, have a big moment. And everyone that I've talked to when we were producing the book, and everyone who I've talked to since has said, okay, if there were anything they were not expecting, it was the Vulcan Navy.
Yes.
No one ever expects the Vulcan Navy. And so that was a big moment that I wanted to have. And so, we got that. And, we ended up having, what I think is an epic journey by land, sea, air, ice, over hills, over mountains. I resisted using the actual wagon train to the stars phrase.
Yes.
But I did not resist it entirely.
No.
So
I thought of that
yes.
too, because I was thinking Casey and I discussed the New Earth series that they had done for Star Trek books, and that phrase came into mind. But you had brought up the idea of this planet kind of being a Luddite utopia, and I was thinking, this book really is the idea of as utopias turn, because this planet FGC 778b is
781b.
1B, excuse me, you're right. Is that, it is this quote unquote utopia, but there's kind of a stench there behind the roses. Yeah. And with your background, I know in Soviet studies, I was really interested to see how you crafted this, because they're a place that has crafted their story to make people believe in their project. And yet there's kind of a hidden truth behind this history.
Well, there always is.
Yes. And so we kind of see the idea of you've got complete control here. And that's an attitude that's kind of pervasive today of what people know. And then the idea you don't ask questions, or you don't ask questions that aren't deemed the right questions by leadership. And so this was a really fascinating discussion for Star Trek, I think, and especially this series to be having.
Well, the character of Joe is in every draft. Because we have Joe and we have Jenny, his daughter. The character of Joe was always there as somebody who would be representative of somebody who would step wrong, who would step out of line and be reprimanded. But I wanted to show how weak the reprimand was. I wanted to show that this is not the case that he's clapped in irons. It is not the case that he gets dragged off to some 1984 style torture chamber. Nobody is trying to reprogram him other than with the propaganda that they use every day. Mm-hmm. And we get the notion that probably he has been gone through this many times and that he's quite annoyed and he's just not going to listen anymore. And everybody's just kind of going, yeah, that's Joe. That's Joe. It's not something where, when we have these moments where they start having to raise the stakes of what they're going to do to stop the wagon train, to stop the people fleeing on the ships, as they have to keep raising the stakes. There is this very definite reluctance, or there's Draco is very far removed from it. But it's definitely the case that it's like, please don't make us hurt you. Please, we're not good at hurting people. Please don't make us go to this kind of trouble. It's only when there's an existential threat to what the project is that they bring out the big I don't want to say guns necessarily, but the big guys from one of the species that are the most aggressive on the planet, and that they do everything that they do to try to stop them. And we have a siege in a keep. Even I enjoyed doing all of these moments, and again, pivotal to the whole thing. And when the story really gelled is with Lila Talley, when we had this notion that I had always known that they would have followed somebody to the planet, that they would be searching for somebody when they got here. And have it be somebody who is in Pike's past that we've never heard of before, but maybe not necessarily a long lost love, but somebody who's a childhood friend, who they grew apart, and I realized, okay, and I can give this person a motive to buy wholly into the society, even to the point where she would compromise her own shipmates, compromise her own values, in order to remain in this place, because again, she's actually really broken. And it's not until Pike breaks through and finds out what happened that we're able to actually get some kind of resolution.
Yeah, that was really interesting, because there's in the whole Utopia side, and this idea is, it really becomes this willful blindness. And Tavar says this great quote. I loved it. She said, "This life, my young friends, we all look out from our limited perspectives of our times and our surroundings, and you either choose to expand your perspective, as you have done, or you act as the Sigarans. Keep everyone blind. It's the definition of the game: lives lived, but to no end. And there's such a beauty to pointing that out, that you would become willfully blind.
Well, and don't you like the idea of Vulcans who, on their own, come to Surac's principles, or
Yes.
On their own, over the time, because they just have time to realize, okay, yeah, this is the penance they have done, being on this planet and being stuck here. So, I wanted to give them a resolution as well, and an arc. So yeah.
Well, yeah, it's kind of counter to like Solarius, who, he's grown up in the society, and he kind of has this feeling that something's wrong, and whereas Lila's kind of tried to stop time, and by her own grief and everything that she's gone through, Solarius, he just thinks it's easier to keep things the way they are. Maybe he has this inkling that things are not right, but he's kind of essentially putting his head in the sand. And it takes Una really to kind of break him out of that and kind of show him that his ways are not the right ways, and maybe he doesn't want to continue the same way as his father.
That's right. And she helps turn him into the person that he, could be, if he were not trapped himself. They're all trapped. Draco is not happy. They're all trapped in the system, because it's impossible to manage after a certain point. It's just impossible, because there's too many people. There's too many people who have differing ambitions. You just can't stop this rock from rolling down the hill. And, there's so many things that are out of control. And really the first two drafts, as I said, they were a lot more violent. The Skagarans had lost control of the experiment by then, in those drafts. And you had more destructive things happening. And what happened is we decided to dial it back. Kirsten said, what if this Utopia still works, but only just barely? And I said, okay, good. And that there's some people who it doesn't work for at all. And that really set me off. Here's what we'll do. We will put this civilization on the precipice. And my presumption is that if Enterprise had not arrived when it did, and if Pike and the others had not come up with a way to actually, bring them, into the larger world again safely, that the place would have imploded. It would have imploded eventually, for the same reason that they can't stop the horses. There are thousands and thousands of horses everywhere. There's an entire forest that's overrun by cats. You've got a naturalist in Solarius who is he's made it his life's work to try to get some control over these competing species, these competing biomes that were never intended to be together. And if you want to know what the connection with Rogue Elements is, do you remember seeing the word Solarius in Rogue Elements?
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been more time than I expected.
Yeah, maybe. Oh, dang it. Now I have to go back and search the book.
The Silvus project is the project that is renovating the destroyed worlds. It is terraforming by transporting acres at a time, and they are bringing in new. They're bringing in new forestry. They're bringing in. There's a Ferengi that's selling the Silvus project manure. They're bringing in new things, but they have a nemesis that is referred to several times, and they refer to them as a terrorist group, or as their arch enemy. but they're against the idea of transplanting species, against the idea of transforming worlds. And two of the members of that project, or two of the former pilots for that project, are Rios's pilots. And they worked for the Solarius Front.
Nice. That's awesome. That's a great connection.
That is.
And that's over a course of 100 years. But obviously, where we leave Solarius at the end of this book, he's not going to feel like that this project was worthwhile now. Right. He's going to think that it was a bad idea. And so you've got that, and really the only unhappy ending in the entire thing is belongs somewhat to Draco, but Draco is also, you get the idea that he's also just over it. Yeah. He's just, because he'd like to just sit in his garden and do his thing, and it's just not possible anymore because this thing is spun out of control. You would need supercomputers to run and manage this Epcot Center kind of place, but planet wide. It just and managing it, there's been there's an entire industry that is in the capital city that's in Omataya, basically devoted to managing this place, so that all hell doesn't break loose. This is why they're very concerned. As soon as somebody gets out of line to the extent that Pike gets the people riled up, not intending to, by the way, not intending to. He is trying to mind the Prime Directive. Una is trying to mind the Prime Directive, or rather Chin Riley, because we're in the middle of the book when we get told, okay, she's got to be Chin Riley through the whole book, because that's the way we refer to people in Starfleet, last names, if they're on second reference, and so although I did use a literary device for every one of these chapters, and again, it helps people listening on the in the audiobook. We state everyone's full names again at the opening of every single chapter. So it's Neona Uhura, it is Una Chin Riley. So anybody who was around just for the couple of years where Una was her name, will know who we're talking about. And Una is still her name. It's just not her only name.
I loved that, as you were talking about the idea of the way Solarius is kind of wanting to stop time, Casey, and the idea of him kind of sticking his head in the sand, and John, you brought up too the way Lila's doing that, and I loved the way that you brought this to that. We find out the reason for it in the fact that, she's so distraught, she's so hurt, she's so broken that she's kind of run to safetyism. And that safetyism for her is this place where nothing ever changes, because she's so afraid of change ever happening to her again, because the major change in her life destroyed her. And she becomes willing to almost get to the point where she's going to force this on the entire galaxy without their say so. And it brought to mind one of the reasons why this project of stopping time doesn't work, in the same reason that the Amish don't force their children to live like that. They get the choice with Rumspringa. Do I go home after this, or do I stay in the world? But they have to make the choice for themselves. And here, when you strip away choice from people, you're going to run into a problem. And it's the same reason the Federation works. People have a choice to be a part of it, but they also have the choice to not be a part of it. And so that you cannot stop time in this way, and force people to do things like this that they don't want to do.
And I really tried to show that this was a universal discontent that was brewing up, that we had members of other species that were on the planet I mean, Carpenter is a representative of the big bruisers that are actually, they don't mind being on this planet in general because they were about to be wiped out before they got here. But even he's like, yeah, I'd like to build something that lasts. I'd like to build something interesting. And then we have the folks, the builders in the keep at Krykander, where the giants, the titans that we have in the end, where they're handcrafters, and they're expected to remain handcrafters. They're expected to remain craftspeople. They're expected to remain just tying the flies for fishing line the same way over and over again by hand, and not ever do anything else. People have some of these people are long-lived. Some of these people get bored. Some of these people want more for themselves. And so, one of the fun things about this book, and, I designed it to be an epic, not necessarily an event, but an epic story that, if you wanted to visualize this as a season of the show or something like that, or a season of a show, you have this thing that has a lot of texture to it, where you could see there is a secret economy that is going on the outer fringes, where the marine peoples, the peoples that are on the coast, have been trading with the Vulcans very quietly. They have been trading with one another very quietly. What do the Vulcans have to offer? They save people. And how, it's just, the Vulcans, I guess if anybody dies in this book, it doesn't happen during the book, but we do get the notion that the way that the Vulcans have been safe is that if any airship comes anywhere near, they start firing. Yeah. which is enough, usually to do it. But I love the moment where where Tavar basically comes to the realization that this ship that has been my home for the last 100 years, it will deliver us from this place, but only if I destroy it. And she's there. And so I'm happy with that. And so it's again, any one of these arcs in here could have been expanded. It could have been 150 page or 150,000 words instead of 133. It could have been 175. But I think what we did is we got it to the size that it could be published. Yeah. And also we have a lot here where it implies that there are other stories to be told. I actually did talk briefly to the folks that do the role-playing game to see if it's even possible to do side stories that could take place during the book. And there was no way to do it the way that I had envisioned it. But this was around that time where we knew that that the book was going to be delayed. And so what I said is, well, let's try to give something else if we can't do that. What I came up with, well, actually, I'd already come up with it because I already had the maps, and I already discussed the maps with everybody involved. It's just I don't think anybody really thought that I was going to get the maps done, because it's one of those things where it's a wish list kind of thing. And once the delay happened, I went and talked to James Mishler, my friend, with a colleague of mine. He's a game designer. He and I co-wrote a comic book series, which actually releases March 1st, which is the day after we're recording this, a comic series based on a pirate ship game that Ubisoft is doing called Skull and Bones. And we co-wrote that. And I went to him and I said, look at all these maps I have, and it's basically scraps of paper and napkins, and in some places it's not maps, it's notes that Havenbrook is to the west of this other place. It's to the east of this other place. That her house is to the south. We were able to figure out, okay, let's winnow this down into just a few maps. And I said, well, then I'll do them in 3 different styles, and then 3 of them will connect. That's something where I think that can't be underrated in terms of how people are going to look at this book years from now. Because the Lost Tribe of the Sith novel that I did for Star Wars also added the maps as an afterthought. There's only 2 maps in that, and that book is on its 19th printing. And it is in part because people love to be able to follow along what's going on. And there are elements on the map. There are blank spaces. Well, actually, the maps have even more information about the society. You'll notice that these maps would have come the last 4 maps. The first map is Jenny McGee's map that she drew for Pike, so he would know how to get to Lila's place. But the last 4 are ones that Una found in the library in the Capitol. And one of the things you'll notice there is, when people flip through to look at this book in the beginning, they're going to think, okay, these circles that are there, those are cities. They're not cities. They're Rangers. They're Rangers that are on the planet. The things that run the. Actually, if you want to see a Ranger, on the cover of the book, we actually have a Ranger in operation because we describe them as being glowing orange and yellow. And the planet itself doesn't look orange and yellow. So, but no, the idea is when you look at it, there are a lot of Rangers that don't have populations associated with them, and a lot of them are on the surface of the water. A lot of them are just they're wherever the wherever the Sari needed them to, the Sari needed them to be. To actually make their great machine function, and so it's one of those things where you could visualize doing more stories on a planet like this, but only in a certain time frame, because things are about to change a lot when we get to this book.
Well, it was really interesting because I love the maps and thinking of the Rancher. Like I didn't realize until part of the way, like halfway through the book probably, that's what those were. And when we found out that there were so many, it was like 1,005, like 5 to the 5th power plus 1 or whatever it was.
Well, that's the number. And if you look at them, they're all levitating.
Oh yeah,
it's a circle over a line, and so the clues are there. So it's But I decided, I'm not going to put a key on here. I'm going to let people figure it out on their own.
Yeah,
and that's what we did.
And that was really nice.
And hopefully people will figure out on their own that the way that the maps connect is not left right center, but they're actually going northwest northeast the entire time. Nice. Northeast toward the setting sun, because the planet spins in the opposite direction. Yeah. And so they're going north the whole time. And that was one of the things that I needed to work on the planetary side of things with, because the planet does, have short days and short years, and a significant axial tilt. That allowed us to actually cross several climates in a short period of time. Because it's autumn in it's autumn in the western town when we're leaving, but it's very clearly winter when we get where we're headed.
Well, one of the things, like it, as far as world building, the maps helped, and then kind of being able to see where like Omataya is, in relation to everything else. And, one of the things we were thinking about for this book was just the technology that the Skagarans basically found when they arrived on this planet. And they had an idea of what they wanted to do with it. But we were thinking of this quote from Jurassic Park where it didn't require any discipline to attain, the power that they'd found. They read what others had done and took the next steps and didn't earn the knowledge for themselves and then didn't take any responsibility for it. So, they had their own idea of what they wanted to do with it. But then, especially as we see at the end of the book with Draco and how he can't, replicate this. And even the Skagarans themselves can't even replicate the technology they used to bring anybody there anyway. They just basically don't even have any idea of how this tech works or what the purpose of it was to begin with, and end up endangering lives because of it, even if their original intentions may have been somewhat honorable.
Yeah. And, and it's also important that that the Sari be unaware of what they were doing to other people. That they're not the villains in this either. Mm-hmm. And once they are aware and once they are unrestrained, by the actions of the Skagarans, they put it right immediately as soon as they can, as soon as they're allowed to, and sacrifice themselves. And again, that's very Star Trek.
Yes.
Yeah, I loved that. The way in which this book is so much about technology and the fact that the way we use it is usually so haphazard. Like we kind of shoot, aim, instead of aim and then shoot when it comes to technology. And we don't really think about the ramifications on ourselves and our world. Because, you end up with this people who are like anti-technology, and yet technology is only a tool, and how you wield it is really a big part of whether or not it can be good and or bad for people in general or your environment or any of those type of things. And I love that because it's not either or,
right?
It's both and. Like technology is good and technology can hurt us, but if we figure out a way to use it correctly, it can actually be a benefit. And being able to that's such a great Star Trek discussion.
Well, that's again goes back to Tavar talking about seeing beyond the context of one's existence.
Mm-hmm.
Once the Sari realize, oh gosh, we're hurting people, they do the right thing. Mm-hmm. It's not Draco's instinct though. Once he realizes that he's hurting people, he's trying to keep the family business going. But again, I think it's really more because of inertia and not knowing what's coming. And also, you have to assume that, they're high on their own supply to a degree. If you want to use that phrase, they are absolutely convinced that the planet that they came from was horrible and was made horrible. And if we're left to our own literal devices, if we use technology, we're going to turn out that way, and we're going to turn this place just as bad. This place is a great place for us, and we need to keep it like this. And that I wanted to show. I thought it was important to, at the end that we actually see Skagara, mm-hmm. and that's another choice that I made, because I was like, all right, it would be very easy and very science fiction-y to have the planet be wonderful. They fixed it. They repaired it. And everything, the planet that they came from. And No, I want everybody involved to know this is a project as well. It's going to take work. And if you're so good, Solarius, at fixing planets without messing with the laws of nature any more than he does in terms of the very ground level of genetic engineering he's doing on this planet. Then here's what you should be doing. You need to try to see if you could repair this. Imagine if the Skagarans had imagine if this group of Skagarans in the beginning had put their technology and their efforts into trying to refine and replace and restore the world that they came from. But again, so many years have passed, and we get this fun moment where we realize that even the Luddites are using technology. They just don't know what it is,
right?
Or
yes.
they don't know that they're doing it. And I think that there are a number of characters here in the book that some of them are very terrified of what life is going to be like after what comes or after all of this. There's one particularly timid character who is initially realizes that things are not what they seem to be, but he's still scared.
Well, and I love your use of characters in the book too. Like you'd said before, how you started with a lot of characters on the planet, but then kind of narrowed it down. And I think Uhura was one of the best choices to be on this planet. Not only is she a cadet and she's young, and she's also a character that we know from the original series, but she's the perfect person to really be the one to have an actual kind of first contact with the Sari or the Empi, the Epitherm. It's just perfect that she's the communication specialist, and she's the one that realizes these are sentient beings that are being used. And it just brings to mind how important communication and time are when trying to figure out how to use a resource, rather than, like we said before with the Skagarans, just jumping in and using it without knowing anything about it.
I like giving the scientist or rather the engineer a situation where what he knew about engineering was of no use. I like giving the communications person no one to talk to for quite some time. In the case of Chin Riley, the person who's in charge of managing everybody is not able to manage anybody. Because there isn't anybody on the planet there. I thought that her story could only have included her. She was always going to be in this role. Once we got further into it and I understood what her backdrop was, or her background that they had added, her parents dying in a shuttlecraft accident. Well, that's just even more adding to it. But I wanted somebody to be completely alone and terrified, and that's her.
Yeah, I think it worked really, really well. I think one of my favorite things about this story is the way in which and this is one of the things that I love about your books. Casey and I were talking about this but before you hopped on, but the idea that everything about this book means something. Like, you don't have anything in this book that isn't important to the story. And all of these stories, whether it was from Starfleet to the Vulcans to Draco to the Sari to everyone involved, what we're dealing with here is unintended consequences.
That's right.
And that it's how you deal with those unintended consequences once they come up that makes a big difference. And that's one of the things I think you do so well in your books, is you're able to tie all of the thematic elements together so that there isn't anything extraneous. And
Yeah.
I love that.
Well, even things that feel like they're extraneous. I could have gone on for probably pages and pages and pages when we're dealing with the bureaucracy that has grown up around the lookouts and around the rules that they've got in the rule books, because they have encountered so many unintended consequences that they had to get rulings of for. Because there would be trade. There would be things where people would somebody's going to come up with this invention or that one or this one, and they would have to actually make a call on it. So I've got that section in there, and it's there for that reason, where it shows how picayune some of these rulings have had to be to make this whole system run. And there's got to be clearly the lookouts, the people who are the deputies, clearly they have to have some awareness that this has gotten silly. This is and of course they're convinced that they're doing it for their own goods. But when a guy who's tinkering with a motor in the attic of a mill is breaking the law, well, that's a strange law. But when a guy tinkering with a motor can also bring down a fiery spirit that destroys the entire mill by accident, so there you go. And again, just fun notes, that we were able to hit some fun moments. Enterprise, being stuck up in space without any way to help except by observing, and then coming up with various different carrier pigeon ways of getting getting things down to the surface. I love the whole way that Pike contacts them in space. And one of the reasons that the first map in the book has a little thing that says orbital enhancement superimposed, it's because if you look at the mill, the roof of the mill has the coded message on it.
So great. Well, John, we probably could talk about this book for another few hours, and really just because there's so much that we haven't even gotten to cover. But I know that you have been so busy with conventions. We don't want to keep you forever, but I do want to give you the opportunity to let everybody know, where you're going to be coming up, and what other books you've got coming up as well, so they can be checking those out.
I appreciate that, and I'm delighted that folks are liking this book, because I tried to make it I tried to make every book completely different. And it's hard to look at this book and say that it's even in the same genre with Rogue Elements, or Die Standing, or Enterprise War, because it's just very different things. I have quite a lot of travel coming up. I don't know when this is airing, but first weekend in March, I'm at Emerald City Comic Con. Third or fourth, I think fourth weekend in March, it is GalaxyCon Richmond. The weekend before that, actually, I'm doing a signing at House of Heroes comic shop in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And then the final weekend of March and into April, that is C2E2 in Chicago. And that's the first big wave here of my stops. And there's more to come. People can go to farawaypress.com/events and see all of that. And farawaypress.com is my regular hub, where people can find notes on my earlier books. I'm derelict in getting to the Star Trek stuff, because there's as you can tell, there's a lot of stuff in these books to write about.
Yes.
And I'm still stuck back in the essays that I was doing for the Prey trilogy. So I'm a good 7 years back at this point. But so we have that, and there's also a link on there for signed copies and a link to my. I run an eBay store now for signed copies. It's cheaper just to get them through my website, but I have some of my odds and ends that are kind of harder to find things on there. And one of the things that will eventually be there as well is we've mentioned Skull and Bones. The first issue comes out March 1st, and then there's 2 more issues of that tied into the Ubisoft video game. Those are comics from Dark Horse. From Marvel, on March 14th, there is what's called the Star Wars Epic Collection Volume 4, or Star Wars Epic Collection, The Old Republic Volume 5. And what that is, those are the Knight Errant graphic novels. I did a novel
fantastic.
called I did a Knight Errant novel years ago, but I also did 3 comic series that were collected by Dark Horse and then have been out of print since 2014. And so those are all in one big book that is coming out March 14th. That also sets up the prospect that everything will end up in the second volume of the omnibuses for the Old Republic. And then people will be able to go to, these 2 7.5-pound books and get just about every Star Wars thing I ever did for
awesome.
Dark Horse. And that is in the middle of March. There are a couple of nonfiction books coming out from the professors Amy Sturgis and Emily Strand. One on Star Wars and one on Star Trek. And I was asked to write essays for both on the tie-in novels and canon and continuity, and how the decisions made in one franchise impacted the other as far as licensing is concerned, and things going back and forth. And that is a lot of fun, or will be a lot of fun for Star Trek readers, because I interviewed David Mack at length about
Nice.
Coda. I interviewed Greg Cox. I did a lot of deep dive research into some stuff, and so
That's
I'm not
awesome.
sure what the date is for those, but those are coming out from Vernon Press. And when there's a release date on those, people will find them on my Twitter is JJMFaraway. I also have that as my address or my handle on post.news. And then I'm John Jackson Miller on Facebook and Instagram.
That is awesome, John. Well, I can't wait for almost all of those things to come out, but thank you just so much for giving us your time and for putting so much into all of the stories you write. We really appreciate it. And I think Casey and I both agree this is like an incredible book that everybody should pick up. If you like, and the best compliment I could give you, when you read tie-in fiction, you want it to feel like you're watching an episode. And this legitimately felt just like I was watching an episode of Strange New Worlds. So thank you for giving us that.
I appreciate that. And to everyone, may the Force live long and prosper.
We didn't, when we talked to John, talk about our ratings of this book, and I really don't know why, because I'm not bashful about this. I gave this a 5-star. It was an amazing book. The perfect start to the novel verse of Strange New Worlds. And, like we said, it's got everything we could ask for in a Star Trek story and more. And so I'm super excited to see where the novel line goes for Strange New Worlds. I hope John Jackson Miller stays involved with that. And, because we don't get very many novels anymore. And, when they put out bangers like this one, we don't want to keep these authors around. So I assume you feel the same way about the book.
No, I mean, 100%. Like I can't even get the words out, because I love what you said there about the idea of like bangers like this, because I feel like John Jackson Miller only writes bangers when it comes to Star Trek books. I've loved all of his Star Trek books. I thought they've been great. But this one definitely proves, well, I think like his Rogue Elements novel, he's so good at truly understanding not only the characters of the series that he's writing for, but crafting stories to which weave in so much fun Star Trek lore in ways that are completely unexpected. And so, no, right there with you, this is absolutely 5 stars for me, just like Rogue Elements was. This is phenomenal. Everybody should pick it up. If you're listening to this for some reason, if you haven't, just go do it. You will not be disappointed. This is a fantastic book, and we got some great stuff coming up for everybody here as we're going to be continuing on in our Voyager series that we've been reading, Dark Matters, as well as our Rebels series with Deep Space Nine. We're going to have a Discovery book that's going to be coming out here, I think, at the end of May. And then, we're also going to be having this year the autobiography of Captain Sisko. So we do have some new stuff that's going to be coming, but we've got some great stuff in store for you here on the show. We can't wait to get there. But Casey, people want to catch up with you, talk to you, anything Star Trek related or anything else, where would they find you?
Probably the best place is on Facebook and the Babel Conference right now, but you can also search for me elsewhere on social media. I'm at Knitting Trekkie. I'm keeping pretty up to date in Goodreads and Letterboxd, and I look at Twitter and Instagram from time to time too.
Well, you can also find me on the social medias under the name Matt Rushing02, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Vero. Those are the places that I am most active. You can also, of course, find me here on the network, the 602 Club. We're talking about everything outside of Star Trek that we love. So many great fandoms to be able to discuss over there, so I hope you'll check that out. Also doing the Orb about Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Warp 5 about Star Trek Enterprise, Saddle Up about Strange New Worlds, and, of course, Star Trek Picard's going on. So with Season 3 just, like, killing it, we're talking about that on the Artificial Tango. And then over on the Nerd Party Network at 2 shows, one I did with Dre Coffin, we talked about every single chapter of the Harry Potter series on Owl Post, and then Aggressive Negotiations is where I talk about Star Wars with the great John Mills. But thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, live long
and read on.
You call that light reading? To each his own, number one.